Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com and I want to welcome you all today to part 3, or the final chapter of the 3-part video series on this 1/16 scale radio-controlled Russian T90 main battle tank. The model in this video is built for commission and belongs to a private collector. As I often mention in these videos, I frequently take on commission-built projects from models ranging between 1/35 scale and 1/6 scale. For availability and pricing information, that would be best by contacting me through the email address listed below, which is info@eastcoastarmory.com. Just like with the other 1/16 scale builds that are found on this channel, this model here is the subject matter of its own 3-part video series. In part 1, I give the model a review and I go over the model in its original configuration, as well as also briefly mention some of the mechanical and build aspects that went into the model. In part 2, I go over exclusively the external detail fittings, as well as the paintwork, and also some of the detail modifications that were made to the model to bring it up to the condition that we have here. And in part 3, where we're watching right now, I'm going to go ahead and take this model outdoors and give it a thorough test drive. So stay tuned, because there's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming your way. Here we have the model outdoors in an unseasonably warm February day, which is absolutely perfect because it makes filming that much easier and more enjoyable. Seriously, filming these videos in the wintertime outdoors really sucks, so I'll take the warm weather whenever I can get it. Anyhow, back to the topic at hand. So, as I mentioned before, the tank does have some mechanical upgrades that have been made to it, some of which are standard aftermarket off-the-shelf parts, and others are some custom bits that I added myself. So for the aftermarket components, the first was the gearbox. The tank originally had a plastic gearbox, and we swapped that out with the Heng steel gearbox. That was a simple drop-in installation. In addition to the drop-in gearbox, the tank's track, sprocket, and idler were also swapped out with the aftermarket die-cast ones that, again, are pretty commonly found online. The remainder of the tank's RC functions are stock, and this tank utilizes, I believe, the 7.0 system. As for what the differences are, there are plenty of other channels out there that go into that in more depth, but this one here does have several improvements from the older generation ones that I even personally noticed, and I'll be sure to mention that when I actually turn the tank on. Some other custom mods that I made in terms of mechanical systems are with the dazzlers right here. These are the aftermarket ones, and I patched them into the circuit, but I patched them into the headlight circuitry. As I mentioned before, there is a switch right over here that switches between the headlights, which are in silver, and the dazzlers, which are in red. As for what this coil of wire is, well, that is the recharge jack. As I mentioned in the previous video, this tank does have a recharge jack, so the need to take the model apart is not necessary unless there is an emergency. Because, you know, the tank is fully painted and weathered, trying to get access to the thing in this condition is a bit problematic. So it's easier to just charge the thing remotely by flipping open the hatch here, pulling this cord out, plugging it in, as opposed to flipping it upside down, getting in there with a screwdriver, and, you know, you could potentially cause problems where damaging the model, breaking some details, or even just scratching the paint, neither of which are really any fun. Also, it's a hell of a lot faster to charge it in this format compared to the other method. The other mechanical modification I made involves the gunner's hatch right over here, which, as if I flip it over, you will see it has the power switch. The power switch on the model was originally located underneath the extended fuel tank right over there, and originally when these things first made it to the market about 10 years ago, the switch was actually underneath this row wheel over here on the flat side portion of the hull. They moved it over here, but I moved it to the turret because over here, in my opinion, it's a bit of an eyesore. Some people are going to claim, oh, it's not that bad. Yeah, to me, it's just, no. I would rather have it concealed under a hatch like I've done here. And also, again, it's easier and faster to do this to get access to the switch, as opposed to fiddling down back here where it could potentially cause damage to the fuel cans. Again, it's a bit more, let's just say, problem-free by going in this route. As for what this other little plug is, this unit, because it's a 7.0 system, it does away with the kill switch for the airsoft gun, and instead it has this ability to either have airsoft or IR, and you plug in this little supplied unit and it's supposed to facilitate that. Don't really know too much more about that. I don't really do the IR thing, but again, there are a lot of other channels on YouTube that go into that in way more depth. Back to the functions, like I stated before, the thing does have an airsoft shooting cannon, so we'll see what that looks like when I fire the model up. I might as well go ahead and actually get to doing that. So, first thing I'm going to do is turn on the radio. Then I'm going to go ahead and power the tank on. Because the dazzlers are currently selected on the switch, you'll see that they are blinking as opposed to the headlights, which is normally will be blinking right now when you turn the tank on at this time. So to actually fire it up and start driving it, you need to push the little padlock over here, and it's going to start the sound system as well as the smoke system, which is currently left in the on position. Are you fucking kidding me? Well, that was an interesting turn of events. Who'd have guessed it that the stock battery is crap and needs to be changed? This is literally one of the very first times I actually didn't swap out the battery on a rebuild, and I kept the original one, as at the time it seemed like it was working just fine. Keep in mind, we did play around with this tank quite a bit before the rebuild, but for some reason after the tank's rebuilt now, the battery just can't hold a charge. So, as we generally mention in this business, the stock batteries are basically just enough to get you off the ground, but it would be best to look elsewhere for something of higher quality. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing on this one here. So this one's actually going to be getting a quick little refit. The battery is going to be replaced. The original model comes with a small little lithium-ion battery, and that is going to be swapped out with a more conventional 7.2. Here we have the battery that I use on basically every one of my 116 builds. If anyone's seen any of the other ones on the channel, these are the batteries I am rolling with. These here are procured off of Amazon.com, and the link can be found in the video description below. Normally, something like this would be a really easy and quick modification to do. I flip the model over, drop the plate, swap out the battery, make the connections, and call it a day. But on this one here, it's going to require a little bit of extra work because Heng modified the T90 mold, where instead of having a large battery well for a 7.2 battery like this one here, they shrunk it for the new lithium ion. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of plastic surgery on the inside here to get this battery to fit. As for the battery itself, I already mentioned where I got it from, and if I take it out of the packaging here, this is what we get. In addition to swapping out the battery, I'm also going to have to make a new recharge jack because this one here is a 3-pronger that's intended for use on that lithium ion, and this is going to be replaced with one for a standard Tamiya plug. So I'm going to have to go ahead and cobble one of those together. Hopefully I have enough little plugs and jacks on hand to do the soldering work required for that. But enough of that. Let's go ahead and get the tank ready to come apart. As we mentioned before, the tank is held together by a number of fasteners. 2 less on this example because I did the magnet modification I mentioned in the previous video. But I am still going to have to remove the other 4. The one thing I do want to mention is the ones here on the front. On the front of the T90, we have this retracting bulldozer blade, and we have these struts that are supplied with the model. They're very nicely detailed and are a really nice touch. However, 2 of the fasteners are located literally directly underneath these 2 sections, and you cannot get access to them with these units in place, so these have to be removed. When I was building the model, I was sure to factor this in, where these 2 in the center are just super glued on and are held on permanently. However, the 2 on the ends are held on with white glue because, again, in case this need ever emerged, I could go ahead, yank these 2 out, and I could go ahead and get access to the battery, or I should say to the fasteners, without causing any serious or any damage to the parts themselves. So right now I'm going to go ahead, pluck these 2 guys off, take off the fasteners, and then yank off the upper hull, which will look something like this. With the upper removed, the first thing I'm going to do is to get the CPU popped off of the bottom hull here where I glued it, as well as also I'm in the process of yanking out the recharge jack. Right now the recharge jack has been unplugged. I also popped off of the little hot glue sections that I used to secure everything in place originally. Also, the CPU needs to be removed from this section over here because this is where the battery needs to sit, and the CPU is going to be removed to the front section over here where it was actually originally when the model was first purchased. Fortunately, the CPU was just glued in place with hot glue, so yanking it out is not going to be a detrimental affair. So the old recharge jack has been removed. I'm going to keep this on hand. Who knows when this thing might actually come in handy again. So this could be set aside here in my inventory of spare parts. Okay, from here, let me go ahead and yank out the CPU. We use a screwdriver for that. And then once that's popped off, I need to go ahead and make a modification to the battery well, and you'll see why momentarily. Okay, that did the trick. this wire's out of the way. And I'm definitely going to have to do some slight modification with all the zip ties that I added before, because that's not going to be relevant anymore. So, like I mentioned before, the battery tray needs to be modified. Right now, in its location, it's using up this valuable space on the inside that I need to mount on the new battery. So I'm going to go ahead and amputate basically 3/4 of it. I am going to leave this sidewall here and this wall over here left, because I need this to help support the speaker, keep it snug in place. And this wall is going to be required because this is where the CPU is going to be butt up against, and it will give it extra support as opposed to having the thing dangle around loose. To do this job, I'm going to utilize a Dremel with a cutting stone. I could carefully get in here and do the job. I guess I could also use a multi-master if the need be arises, but once that's done, I could then clean up the rest with a Dremel with a high-speed removal bit. No point jib-jabbing about it. Let me go ahead and do the job, and then let's get back to when that's been completed. So here's the new layout of the interior. After some swipes with a Dremel, I went ahead and deleted most of the original battery box well. This was done so that I could have extra clearance for other items. The CPU, I wasn't able to mount it in the front section over here. It just wasn't going to fit for one reason or another. So instead I just had it fit in the area here where the battery box once existed. The 7.2 battery was shoved as far up to the front as humanly possible, just to prevent any sort of hitting with the airsoft system that's found in the turret. The other thing I want to mention is with the speaker. This was originally located here. This was relocated to this spot here in the center of the hull, which oddly enough is actually where Heng originally intended it, because there's a small little section molded into the lower for clearance for this round speaker. The other thing I did was I added the recharge jack. That's in the same location as it was before, only now it's with the Tamiya plug counterpart. From here, I guess I could just bolt it back together, and hopefully it turns out better than the first time around. With the model upper and lower hulls back together, I'm currently testing the turret rotation system. Again, part of the reason why I had to do that mod where the battery is all the way shoved up to the front was because of the low profile of these damn Russian tanks. That gearbox for the airsoft was going to make contact with whichever was underneath. So with everything laid out now, hopefully, fingers crossed, this works. And I am very happily relieved. One thing I do want to mention is that when I first tried the model, I actually mounted it with the battery in the center, as I mentioned earlier on in the video. But I noticed that when I had the turret with the barrel in the low position, I was able to rotate it pretty well. However, if I elevated it and then tried to rotate, because the angle now put that gearbox descending lower into the hull, it was striking the battery, and that was a no-go. So I had to go ahead and make the modification to the configuration that you see here. So I am really, really, really happy right now that this worked out. I'm going to go ahead, remount the battery tray plate that's erroneous now at this point back on the bottom of the model, and reconnect some of the hookups back here that had to be disconnected for the upper to come apart. This would include the tow cable, the tubes, oh, and remount on with white glue those struts for this bulldozer blade. After that, I'm going to give this thing a good thorough charge, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll perform much better when I take this thing outside for its test drive.
Later.
Take two. So, we're back outside, and joke's on me, it is at a more appropriate weather for this time of the season, which for this subject matter, I don't know, I think it would actually be, again, more appropriate. Regardless, let's go ahead and pick up where we left off. So, I'm going to turn the tank on. First, again, turn on the radio, turn on the tank. Okay. Hit the little padlock right there. Now it's painted in red. So as I mentioned before, this stick left and right rotates the turret. One thing that's really cool though about this generation here of the Heng tank is with the elevation. On this model here, to elevate and depress, that's all controlled. That's all controlled by going up and down here on the stick. And why this is relevant is because on older generations of Heng tanks, and same still true I think for the Tagan, the elevation was on a track, and you basically went in one direction, and the thing would just work in a circuit type setting, and you had no actual control of the elevation. And this system was, one, very archaic, and two, one of the downsides was that it took longer to get on target compared to something like this. So this is actually a really huge and a very noteworthy improvement over the older systems. But the system itself is actually kind of old now. The first time I ran into that setup was, I believe, about 6 years ago or so. So it is something that's been quite standard on Henlong tanks for quite some time. But hey, it's still a noteworthy feature, specifically if you're like me and you're used to working with the older generations. Over here we have the smoke right there. You push that button and it puffs away. The smoke system is proportionally controlled, so the more acceleration you give it, the more smoke it will output. Unfortunately, outdoors, you're not really going to see the smoke, but hopefully you can see some of it right here. Let me go ahead and move the camera so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Hopefully you can see it puffing away right now on camera. It's always tricky to get these smoke systems visible outdoors whenever you're trying to record, but if I give it a little bit of gas, you can see it does output a little bit more smoke compared to when it's at idle, and that's a nice feature. I'm just going to go ahead and turn it off though for right now. The next thing is the volume right over here. This is great if you want to drive the tank indoors. You don't want to, have a really loud system. The other functions would include the MG, which is this guy over here. You push this button and it fires the MG. To fire the main cannon for the airsoft, you depress this one and this one at the exact same time. As you can see, it does have that little recoil jitter. However, it's much less compared to some of the older generation ones, which were a bit overdone, but that was just how the systems were back in the day. Enough of that. Let's go ahead and put some miles on these tracks. Let me fire up the smoke system again. And let's just, see what this tank can do. Like the snow is a little bit too much for the T90. Kind of looks like those videos of these real ones stuck in the mud. So let me go ahead and play ARV and see if I could go ahead and free this guy up. And this is what happens when you run in the snow. It's quite typical on all RC tanks for this to happen, so bear in mind if you are a new RC tanker, you want to definitely keep this on the back of your mind. When you're driving your tanks in the snow, the sprocket and the idler tend to ice up, and it just builds up snow and more and more and more of it to the point where it just ices up into a big snowball like you see here. If this happens to you, stop. Do not try to overpower it. You can damage the gearbox. Fortunately, this is a steel gearbox, so that's the likelihood that happening is not exactly that great. But if you are rolling with a zinc glass jaw gearbox, you might as well call it a day, or even a plastic gearbox that could potentially cause issues. So on this one here, I'm just gonna go ahead, let the thing thaw out, and then we can continue with the test drive. After about 20 minutes later, the snow has thawed to the point where we can resume the test drive. So let's go ahead and continue where we left off. Okay, we got some more snow buildup. Let's see if we can muscle through it. We got some oscillating going, but that's due to the sprockets being literally a drum of ice. I don't know, if there was only a device that the Russians had that would be like a spoon-shaped object that would fit in between the sprockets that would prevent that from happening. I don't know. Something tells me that would be a really good idea. Yeah. Wouldn't be one of these videos if there wasn't a little drag along. There we go. As you can see, the layers of snow are building up even more now, to the point where the rear sprocket looks like it has one of those early M1 Abrams derailleurs. However, the tank is still operating more or less just fine. It goes to show you again the importance of a steel gearbox along with the metal track and sprockets. Trying to do this with plastic? I think it would be doable, but it wouldn't run nearly as good as it is right now with the steel and metal counterparts. Let's go ahead and limp it back to the house so it could thaw for another 15 minutes, and then we could do some more snow driving. Oh, it's really icing up good now. I think I can. I think I can. Yeah, she's iced. Okay. Well, let's get her back inside, thaw her out.
Much later.
Alright, so the tank performed pretty well during the test drive. It performed as well as any other of the RTR 116s that I've brought onto the channel in the past. The model actually performed really well. Now, this may sound kind of funny because of all the times I had to bring it inside to let the model thaw out. However, this is typical if you're running in this type of a situation. Running in snow is actually one of the most difficult and the most demanding on a radio control tank of any scale. On this channel, you will see several other boat 116 and 1/6 scale builds running in the snow where it encountered a similar situation of the sprocket or the idler icing up to a donut type look, and the model's performance will start to degrade. Be it on a 116 headlong to a 1/6 scale armor tech, I've seen this situation happen on more than one occasion. And it actually shows you just how well engineered the model actually is for it to operate under these heavy, difficult conditions, and the model at the end comes out perfectly fine. There was no damage done to the running gear, no damage done to the gearbox, and no damage done to the motors or the other electronics. Which, again, I have to stress, running under these conditions here are very, very strenuous. It's probably the most strenuous type of running conditions you can have outside of long, tall grass. That's another one that will just gum you up. But ice over here, running in snow, yeah, it's definitely something that will put the model to the test. And the T90 here actually passed pretty well, considering I had to, pause a few times to bring it in to let the thing thaw out. The other thing that performed extremely well was the new battery. The new battery replacement was something that I cannot recommend enough. If you are building one of these models or have one in your collection, I strongly recommend the battery modification. Otherwise, if you are not the type of person that has the type of capabilities that I mentioned before with the tooling or with the experience with making a modification like that, then you could keep the original battery, but I would recommend buying a lot of them. And this is the type of thing that once the batteries stop working, you can just swap out with a fresh one. Fortunately, these batteries are pretty easily come by on places like Amazon, eBay, AliExpress, and so on and so forth. However, this guy here, I basically just scratched the surface with the running time, and I could probably run this thing for another 40 minutes, given if I didn't have to periodically bring the tank in to thaw out. At this point here, the tank is still being able to run in the snow. As we saw, the sprockets were starting to slip a little bit because of the donut type look we got going there in the back. But, if I push the tank, I could still get a few more, probably about 10, maybe 15 minutes more runtime out of it before the thing totally just ices up on me. This also shows, again, the viability of replacing the gearbox and some of the running gear components with ones made from metal. The tank's performance will greatly improve, specifically if you're going to run it in conditions like this. Would you able to run a all-plastic tank in this situation? Yeah, you probably could, but it wouldn't run nearly as long before gumming up compared to the metal counterpart that we have here. And again, you could potentially open up the window to causing several other problems, namely parts being broken. Also, another benefit of the metal components is that it gives the model added weight, which is something that you need in order to get extra traction on, well, terrain like the one you see here. There's nothing more that needs to be said about that. Let me go ahead and go inside, warm up, get this guy thawed out, and I'll see you guys back on the table. So, in the end, what are my thoughts on this build? Well, first and foremost, this is actually a really, really cool vehicle. The T90 was always something I'd known about for quite some time, but like with many of the other builds that I've done for commission, chances are really unlikely I would have ever got to one, or if I did, it would have been, a little bit down the road. T90, it's a really interesting vehicle, but it's not exactly one on my hit list per se, so I'm kind of glad that I was able to actually have the opportunity to work on one and really get a chance to sink my teeth into one of these models. And I'm kind of glad that I did, because it is actually an excellent piece. The model itself from Heng is a fantastic model. It's actually kind of like a pseudo model kit in a way, with just how much detailing and components that are supplied with this build. You could really deck it out with just the out-of-the-box parts, much along the lines as I've done here. There are lots of aftermarket accessories out there, even more so than the ones that I've already mentioned in the other video, to enhance or even change it outright into some of the other different variants of the T90. This is the version with the cast turret. They have another one with the squared off turret as a 3D printed kit, and I believe someone out there even has a T90M conversion for this vehicle here. So it's quite an adaptable little model, and because of the availability of Heng models and how relatively affordable they are, this is just fantastic. You could really deck one out and have a lot of fun with one of these. As a quick side note, one of the things that I'm really having a little tricky with filming this video here is trying to get this model completely in frame. I've ran into this with a few other 1/16 MBTs in the past that I've done, and this one here is definitely no different. Because of the length of the tube here, just trying to get this thing in frame is a little bit of a challenge. But aside from that, I'm really glad that I actually got a chance to sink my teeth into one of these. If I was to do, or when I'll do another one, chances are really good I'm going to get one for myself. Spoiler alert, I really like this build. I like the way it turned out. If/when I ever get one of these, I definitely see some areas where I can improve upon it and enhance it from the stock offering, with just, leaving it in this variant of the T90. But of course, that's something for me to, work on, as time goes on. But again, you just can't go wrong with a Heng. They are just excellent. Even if you are just going to leave the thing stock, these Heng models never disappoint. They just run and run and run, and Heng really have perfected the RTR 1/16 scale RC model tank. These things are just bomb-proof. They're great. There's no way else to put it. They do leave room for improvement, of course, with things like extra detail fittings, and some other people will really hack up and mess with the electronics, and that's also, something you can do. There's better gearboxes out there, there are better soundboards out there, there are better motherboards out there, and you could basically trick one of these things out to your heart's content, and many people do. Look no further than YouTube. But if you just want to leave it stock, just have a beater where you can just have fun with it, this thing will also fit the build just perfectly. And with the price of these things, specifically the plastic edition being just a little over $100, honestly, it's a no-brainer. It's a fantastic model to add to your collection. Like I mentioned in the other video, one thing that really transformed it and really just changed it so much is just a simple repaint. The original paint job that it has, obviously, there are some T90s with paint jobs similar to that, but like with most Heng models, the paint jobs are not exactly their strong suit. But again, you're getting just something basic and ready to run, so you can't really cast too much shade on that. But with the model being repainted with just a single color of green over here, it really transforms it and makes it punch well above its own weight. If you haven't noticed, I do have some hearts coming out of me. It's just a fantastic build. Now, of course, I always say that in these videos. I kind of have a builder's love whenever I finish a model, but in this one here, it's still true, as it is true on those other videos too. This one, it's great. For recommendations, obviously, if you're a fan of Russian or com block armor, the T90 is a fantastic choice for you. If you're a fan of just modern armor and you got the other contemporaries like the Abrams, the Challenger, or the Leopard, obviously the T90 would fit into that little category perfectly, not to mention the brand new Merkava 4, which is also a really cool model. Wouldn't mind getting that one as well. The T90 itself, just again, has a lot of adaptability to it, so if you are looking for something to just modify and customize and tune, this kit here is a great way to get into that. Other than that, it's like every other review I've done on these Heng. They are just the best for a 1/16 scale radio control tank. You could get into the RC 1/16 scale hobby for a fraction of the cost compared to getting a Tamiya, and with a build like this, you're not going to find a T90 anywhere else. I remember back in the day when there was this other company, it was a garage company, who were making custom 1/16 scale tanks, and they had a T72 in 1/16 scale also, and that thing was almost $800, and that was back in the late 90s. So, having these models here as available as they are, as nicely detailed as they are, and as affordable as they are, it's just a win no matter which way you cut it. They're just fantastic. And same is also true for the other Heng. But this one here, unlike, say, some of the World War II tanks like their Tiger 1 or their Pershing, which are great, and they do leave a lot of room for improvement, which is also fantastic. You could, deck one out and do whatever the hell you want with one of those. With this one here, you could primarily just stick, like what I did here, with the out-of-the-box parts, and just give it just a good paint job, and detail-wise, it'll still, come out very, very well. Whoever was the design staff who were working on this kit here really hit a home run. It's fantastic. It really is. And I'm just saying that just as a model standpoint, it's a great model. It really is. Another person I recommend these kits to would be anyone who's just an avid fan of radio control. These models are fantastic RC models in their own right. Again, they did a great job with the engineering on them, making them simple, and also the replacement parts are just so easily come by and easily swapped in that if you're just a person that just wants to leave the stock outside and just tinker under the hood, rock on. These things are great for that. Another thing, or I should say another person I'd recommend this kit to would be just anyone who is just, again, looking to enter into the hobby. Unlike several other models I brought on this channel where they're really more or less meant for enthusiasts or someone that has a background in this, for these Henglong models over here, that's not the case. You can literally just pick an entry-level one if you have the most minimum of skills or no skills, and just by sheer practice and trial and error, you can play and tinker with one of these things almost endlessly to customize it to your heart's content. Same is also true if you're working on a limited budget. Say you only have enough funds for a little time to just get the gearbox or just get the track or the sprocket. You can upgrade accordingly and just have a blast while doing it. So again, and that's not just true for the T90, it's true for everything under the Henglong moniker. And you just can't go wrong with a Henglong at the end of the day. And well, there's nothing more that needs to be said about that, which is the perfect point to sign off on this 3-part video series for the 1/16 scale radio-controlled Henglong Russian T90 main battle tank. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being more 1/16 scale build videos like the series that we had here, to the 1/35 scale model showcase videos, and my 1/6 scale project update videos that frequently get posted. Another way to keep in loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There, I have more photographs of this particular build, as well as photographs of the other smaller and larger scale builds that have been seen on this channel in the past. Furthermore, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again, and I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. Till then.